Hi, I'm Ryan Baker, and this is Big Day Education. Today we're going to talk about some examples of how to use clustering in educational datasets. Let's start with some work by Alex Bowers. Alex looked at student grades from kindergarten through high school. And what he did was he used hat clustering to group the students. So here you see his graph. It's a little complex, but let me help you break it down. If you go from left to right, you'll see that student grades, elementary, middle, and high school. And on the far right, you'll see whether the students dropped out or whether they took the ACT college entrance exam. From top to bottom, you see lines for different students, and each line represents a different student in his data set. Within these data sets, every grade a student got in every course is represented with either red or blue. And good grades are red, and bad grades are blue, and middling grades are purple, and stuff that's white represents missing grades. So in this data set, you can see there's a very clear split between two groups of students, and you see that there's a group on the bottom, a group on the top, and they each represent somewhere around half, maybe 35% of the two groups, the dashed line splitting the two. Now what's interesting is all the students in the top cluster, that's really the kind of more likely to take the ACT college entrance exam cluster, because you can see over to the side, that's mostly solid with students who did that. On the bottom, we have the dropout cluster mostly, which is the students who were much more likely to drop out. So already in the grades, there are two very clear clusters. You'll also notice 4 bars on the left just between the clustering and the grade starting. An orange bar, a yellow bar, a green bar, and a purple bar. Now these represent 4 subclusters, which are shown in this graph again. In this graph, it shows the trend of each of these 4 groups in their non-cumulative grade point average. So how well were the students doing? You can see that the orange group, which was more likely to take the college entrance exam, starts high, stays high. The yellow group, also likely to take the college entrance exam, is doing pretty badly in first grade, but slowly rises over time and ends up applying to college, or at least taking the college entrance exam. The green group starts out pretty good. They're good through about 3rd grade, and then they really slump, and they're more likely to drop out. And the purple group start out relatively low to begin with, and they end up being more likely to drop out. Now notice I said start high. Actually, everyone starts high in kindergarten. It's kind of hard to fail kindergarten in the United States, but you can see a relatively big difference already, even by the 1st grade, between these 4 groups. So what Bowers said was, there's actually this distinct group of students who did well until the 3rd or 4th grade, which we saw in the previous graph, and then they started doing much more poorly. And these students actually turned out to be more likely to drop out of high school than students who did poorly from the start through the end. So in other words, it's actually worse to start out good and drop than it is to start out poor and just stay poor the whole way through. And his hypothesis was, in 3rd grade, what happens is there's this switch from learning to read to reading to learn. And the students who don't make that transition very successfully are the students who are likely to do poorer all the way through. And this switch from learning to read to reading to learn was already known, but perhaps we didn't quite know how big an impact it actually has. Another interesting use of clustering in educational data was by Salima Amarashi and Christina Kanadi. They split students by their behaviors in an exploratory learning environment, where students explore artificially intelligent algorithms by stepping through the algorithms and making alternate execution choices in real time. And then they compared these clusterings to learning outcomes. What they found was that there were 3 groups that came out of their data, 2 with low learning and 1 with high learning. The 2 groups with lower learning both tended to move through the environment faster. They didn't pause as much, and they especially didn't pause to reflect after making moves. And this could be interpreted as a failure to self-explain. But the 2 groups of students with lower learning differed in other aspects. First of all, the amount of pausing after backtracking. One group paused more when they backtracked through the algorithm than others, and the degree to which the students adjusted the visual graph in the system. Interestingly, despite these differences, it didn't affect learning. Both groups had relatively poor learning. What really differentiated the poor learners from the better learners was, did they pause to self-explain? A third example of the use of clustering in educational data is Beal, Q, and Lee. They clustered students in terms of 5 behaviors in an intelligent tutoring system for mathematics. The 5 behaviors were, did the student solve the problem correctly in over 10 seconds? Did the student produce an incorrect answer in over 10 seconds and then solve correctly in over 10 seconds? Did the student answer in under 10 seconds? Did the student click on hints in under 10 seconds per hint? And didn't the student pause for over 10 seconds on hints? So having established these 5 behaviors, they then tried to cluster the students in terms of how much the students engage in these. They found 3 resultant clusters. The first cluster had a lot of fast responses and also did a lot of viewing hints after making an incorrect response. The second group ended up reading a lot of help, and the third group answered problems accurately without using much help at all. So one general point was, are these results surprising? It's not necessarily surprising that some students make lots of fast responses and ask for help after making an incorrect response. But this is a faster way to get a model of this phenomenon than it would be to conduct field observations and develop a prediction model. It's a very efficient way to get at this. The resultant model is by nature somewhat less validated. There's kind of a trade-off. When you build these kind of models with clustering, you don't validate them the way you do with prediction models. But on the other hand, it's really fast to get them. So, in my opinion, the greatest power of clustering is to discover completely unknown patterns. And clustering can be really good for this. But it's most useful in areas where you don't know very much. If we already know a lot about gaming the system, what we'll get out of clustering is often gaming the system and we won't learn as much. It still may be a faster way to get the models. There's still a value for work like Bielke and Lee's, but it's not quite as shocking as in completely unknown domains like Americi and Kanadi, where they were looking at behaviors and types of learning systems that hadn't been studied so thoroughly. So this concludes our lectures on clustering. Clustering is a very powerful, cool method. You can use it like Bielke and Lee did to quickly get a model of some constructs in a new learning system, or you can use it like Americi and Kanadi did to learn something completely new about a system we haven't studied before. You can use it like Bowers did to study groupings over a very long and very large set of data and discover what really matters. So, the way Bowers was using it almost kind of connected up to not just clustering, but trying to really figure out what the clusters told us. And in fact, if you look forward on what Bielke and Lee do, they actually use their clusters to study the relationships between those behaviors and other kinds of measures. These are properly issues for next week for discovery with models. We'll conclude this week, our week on structure discovery, with a discussion of factor analysis, a related but very distinct way of trying to find structure in educational data. So I'm Ryan Baker. This is Big Day in Education. Thank you very much. Have a good day.